Morning. Okay, so before we get to our subject today, I want to just comment on something we said last week, which we left kind of unanswered. And that is in the bottom left of page Ayin Tes. All right, we're looking at the Rebbe's commentary to the Haggadah on the paragraphs that conclude Magid, which is our Mishnah. So the Haggadah states, in fulfillment of Rabbi Gamliel's instruction, that we explain the meaning of Pesach, Matzah, and Marar, right? Mm-hmm. So the Haggadah states that why do we have Matzah? Because the Jews had no time to rush out, and the dough had no time to rise. The question that the Rebbe addressed, which comes from commentaries before the Rebbe, who addressed the same question that was collecting from them, is, well, they were commanded to eat matzah before they left Egypt. So seemingly it had nothing to do with rushing out. And the Rebbe cited to these sources, which basically answered that the first year round, meaning when they left Egypt, the commandment then was to eat matzah one day, one night, one day, meaning the night before they left, which is when they had their first Pesach offering. And then the next day, whereas the rest of the 6 days, they were able to eat chametz.
Because of rushing.
And that they could have had chametz there. They didn't have chametz because of rushing out. To which we asked, well, we are eating matzah on the night of the Seder when they would have had matzah anyway. Maybe the next day, 24 hours later, they would have eaten chametz, if not for their rushing out. But that doesn't explain why we're eating matzah. We're still eating matzah because of the commandment.
Can we say we're doing it for both reasons?
Yes, but you still have to explain why this matzah that I'm eating, that's how Haggadah says it. This matzah I'm eating because they rushed out. Not true, because they were commanded to. It happens to be they were also rushed out. So explaining, I looked up the sources, and the bottom line is like this. You're correct. And Chassidus explains there's two different levels of matzah. One level of matzah that comes from the commandment, and one level of matzah that comes from the rushing. But essentially the sources say the following. Besides for the fact that the year the Jews left Egypt, the mitzvah to eat matzah was only at night and the next day, right? There was no prohibition to own matzah, to own chametz. We, today, in addition to the mitzvah to eat matzah, we have a prohibition against chametz.
That's a rabbinic?
No, it's biblical. It's a biblical prohibition to own chametz. We may not own chametz and certainly may not eat chametz. The first year round, they were instructed to eat matzah, but they were not prohibited from eating chametz otherwise. So they could have eaten matzah in their fulfillment, but then had chametz also.
Just practically couldn't.
But they couldn't because of the rush. And therefore, the fact that we're eating exclusively matzah, as well as matzah the whole week, because of the rush.
So is that why we have the Seder at night? Because they ate it at night?
Yeah, we're following the same pattern that they did. It's really the night before they left.
Yeah.
They left the next morning. Yeah. But they were instructed to have a Seder also in Egypt the day before they left.
Yeah.
Right? But their instructions were different than our instructions in a number of ways. And one of the ways in which their instruction was different was they were not prohibited from chametz, even though they were obligated to eat matzah. Kind of like Pesach Sheni. If a Jew, whatever reason, was not able to do the Pesach Rishon, he was too far, he was impure, whatever, the first Pesach. So he does his Pesach offering in Iyar on Pesach Sheni. He's got to eat that Pesach offering with matzah. But he's not prohibited from eating chametz 2 minutes later. And the same thing would have been the night before they left Egypt. So in other words, what the Haggadah is saying, matzah zu, this matzah that I'm eating exclusively matzah, is because they were rushed. So the commandment for future generations to exclusively eat matzah and be prohibited from chametz for a whole week is because of the rush. Okay, so that explains that. Now let's get to our subject today. In order to do this, let's understand the flow of the Haggadah. Okay, let's get to the flow of the Haggadah, which comes from our Mishnah. We spoke about this flow a few times, but let's just recap it now because it's going to be relevant. Let's divide it into 4 segments. Okay, and we're going to be focused on the last 3, but just for the sake of the whole context, we'll do the 4 segments. Yeah, we're clear so far with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Part 1 is the recap of the Haggadah, which is expressed in the three components that Rebbe Gamliel instructed us to talk about, the Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, what we just spoke about. That's segment one. That, if you look at your pages, starts on page Ayin Ches, the first page, Ayin Ches, the paragraph beginning with the word Rabbi Gamliel, right? The second paragraph begins with Rabbi Gamliel. The next paragraph, Pesach. The next paragraph, Matzah. The next paragraph, Maror. The next, 2 pages later on page Pei, B'chol Der V'Dor. Right? B'chol Der V'Dor transitions from part 1, which is recap of the Seder, to the next part. Right? The next part is the paragraph on page Pei, which begins with the word Lefichach. The word Lefichach is, and therefore, because everything I just described about Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, and because Pesach is so amazing that every single generation it rehappens, or it happens to everybody personally. Therefore, I have to praise and thank you and so on. That's segment 2. Segment 3 is the beginning of Hallel, the first half of Hallel, which is the next few paragraphs. The bottom of page Pei, Hallelujah, right? Then there is on page Pei Beis, B'tzeis Yisrael. That's still part of Hallel. Those 2 paragraphs is segment 3. So segment 1 is recap, Pesach, Matzah, Maror. Segment 2 is Lefichach, therefore I got to praise you. Segment 3 is the Hallel. These 2 or first half of Hallel, these 2 paragraphs, Hallelujah B'tzeis Yisrael. Okay,
I don't understand between 2 and 3. You're saying 2 is.
I'm breaking it up. You'll see in a minute why I'm breaking it up when we come to our discussion. But they're really transitions. They flow from one to the other. But let's just see the points in the flow. Point 1 of the flow is recap the story. Point 2 in the flow is, and therefore we have to thank you and praise you. And part 3 in the flow is the actual praise, which is Hallel. The paragraph which introduces the praise, which says, and therefore we have to praise you and thank you and laud you and a whole paragraph. And then we go to the 2 paragraphs of praise, which is Hallelujah B'tzeis Yisrael, the first half of Hallel, the first quarter. The rest of which will be concluded after benching. And segment 4 is the concluding brachas, which is the next paragraph on page Pei Beis, which begins Baruch Atah Hashem Eloheinu Asher Galanu. That is Birchas Asher Galanu, the blessing of redemption. Where we say, blessed are you, has redeemed us, redeemed our forefathers, took us out of Egypt, you brought us to this night, to eat Matzah and Maror, may God grant us more redemption and rebuild the temple and so on.
That's after Birkat Hamad?
No, that's right here. After Hallel, it's right there on the page, you see it, yeah?
Yeah.
And then we drink the second cup of wine, Haggadah. And then goes the meal, Matzah, Maror, and so on. Okay?
Oh, I see.
That's the flow. Okay, so let's just get that clear. Segment 1 we covered, Pesach, Matzah, Maror is done. So we're looking at segment 2, 3, 4. 2 is Lefichach, the paragraph which says, therefore we have to thank you. Segment 2 is the actual Hallel, 2 paragraphs of Hallel. And segment 3 is, or segment 4, whatever for the purpose of today, segment 3 is the blessing of Geula, the blessing of redemption, concluding with the drinking of the second cup of wine. Clear? All right. Why are we talking about this? Because we're going to be looking at today, when do you have to hold the cup? At which point do you have to raise the cup? And how long do you have to hold it for? And what manner do you have to hold it? Within these 3 segments, beginning with, and therefore have to praise you, then to the 2 paragraphs of Hallel, and then to the bracha of Geula, the bracha of redemption, which closes out Magid, concluding with the bracha Haggadah. Okay, this is what we're going to be looking at presently. So let's keep these in mind.
So this is all pre-Korak sandwich, all this.
That's right. This is the second cup of wine, and then from there, we go to Maror, matzah, sandwich. Correct. We close it out with the second half of Hallel.
Yeah.
And the first half of Hallel, and then the bracha for redemption, and drinking second cup of wine. All right, so now that we have that clear, let's look at page Pei, morning, bottom left, Yechase, etc.
Okay.
Well, actually, page Pei. We have another one here.
I have it.
Here, page Pei. We're going to look at this instruction right here. In the middle is an instruction. Here, page Pei. So you go back 1 page. The instruction. Okay. So before segment 1, before we get to the paragraph which is Lefichach, therefore we have to laud you and thank you. Yeah. Let's read it together. Okay. So in the middle of page Pei, where it said the instruction, the italics there. The instruction. So just before there's a small little italics line, it's instructions. Right? We're going to see in a moment from the Rebbe's commentary where exactly that instruction comes from. So the instruction reads, Yechatza sapas, you have to cover the bread, cover your matzah. which is what we do every time we raise our cup of wine, we cover our bread. The bread was uncovered, and we spoke about that way earlier because when you tell the story, you're supposed to be reciting it over the broken bread, over the matzah. So you have your matzah uncovered. But at any point at which you raise up your cup or your hand to the wine, we cover the bread, either for the sake of combination of two things. Number one is the halachic perspective. In respect to the wine, you cover bread the same way you cover, or one of the reasons why you cover your challah when you make kiddush. So likewise, anytime you handle your wine during the Haggadah, you cover your bread. And as well as for Chabad, we would want to make sure that bread doesn't get wet. So whenever we handle wine, we cover the bread. Or bread meaning here matzah bread. Yeah? Okay, so you're about to pick up your cup of wine, and therefore, Yechas hapas, cover the bread. V'yagbia hasakois, raise up your cup. And you hold it in your hand. Ad, until, siyum, the conclusion, birchas hashagar lanu, the blessing of redemption. So the instruction here is to pick up the cup of wine and hold it through all three segments. The transitional segment, this paragraph about to read, therefore we have to praise you. The actual two paragraphs of Halal, Hallelujah, and B'tzeis Yisrael, and the next bracha, which is the blessing of redemption.
What about the first one? The one about the basic matzah mark.
You don't have to hold the cup of wine then.
Wow.
During that point, you're touching your matzah or touching your maror.
Part two.
So we're in part two, which today we're going to drop part one because we're done with that. So we're going to call this now part one of today of the three, right? The latter three. Yeah? Yes, but it was part two in our original description of the flow. Yeah? See, we're going to see in a second. We're not done yet. Don't get too excited yet because we're going to change up our custom in a minute. But this is the instruction here. Pick up the cup, cover the bread, raise up the glass, hold it in your hand all the way to the conclusion of the bracha of Geula. Oh,
but then there's a guffin.
yeah. So why did it? Fantastic question. Why doesn't it say hold it to the end of Haggadah? Everybody's going to ask that question. I'm glad you noticed that. Because right after Galanu, you come to Haggadah. So why?
Right.
What does this mean? Hold it to the end of Galanu and then what? By Haggadah, put it down. What's going on? Yeah, strange. Furthermore, yeah, this question number one. You heard Mayor's question.
Yeah.
Why not just say hold it to the end of Haggadah? Why saying hold to the end of Galanu? Galanu is followed by Haggadah. Good question. We'll get to the Rebbe's commentary. Question two.
You mean the Haggadah is followed by?
Well, look here. This is what he's talking
On
about.
page Pei Beis, right after you finish the blessing of redemption, the next thing you do is make Haggadah and drink. So he just told us to hold the cup until the end of Galanu. Why not tell you to hold it to the end of Haggadah?
I understand the question.
Okay, good.
It seemed like it sounded like.
It sounded like there was a mistake.
redemption followed the Haggadah. That's what I heard.
That's what it sounded like, yes, but not.
Okay.
Right.
Right? It's followed by the Haggadah. Okay, question two. Let's look at page. Where is it? 1 second. Oh, wait, it's not there. Never mind. Okay, we'll see in a second. Okay, so let's now look at the Rebbe's commentary and see what the Rebbe has to say to answer that question and another one which we don't know that's going to come up. Okay, bottom right below the line is the Rebbe's commentary, and the left, I'm sorry, Yechasa, right? Is the Rebbe quotes the instruction here, page. Hey, left the instruction. Yechase, cover, etc. V'yagbeo, pick up, etc. Galon. Right, that's the instruction we just read. Cover the bread, raise your cup, hold in your hand until the end of the blessing of redemption. Okay. Source, Torah v'Shulchan Aruch, in parentheses. Tzarich iyun. We have to investigate. We have to think about the following problem. Tahaya loy loymar. It should have said, Kilashon Hagoyis Maimonus, as it appears in the instructions written by the Hagoyis Maimonus, without getting into who he is, but it's a much earlier commentary than even the Torah. Predates the Torah. He's a student of, actually maybe after the Torah. Same time, because he's a student of Hagoyis Maimonus, a student of Maram Rottenberg. Remember we learned about Maram Rottenberg?
Yeah.
That guy who was put in jail and refused to be ransomed, right? The Torah. So Maram of Rottenberg had many students, including the Hagoyis Maimonus and the Rosh. The Rosh is the father of the Torah. So Hagoyis Maimonus is the same time as the Torah, maybe a little bit even earlier.
He was a student of.
Because the Torah's father was a colleague and of the Hagoyis Maimonus, were both students of the Maram of Rottenberg. So same time of Torah, if not even a little earlier. Okay, so this is how it appears in Hagoyis Maimonus. It says, it says, hold it in your hand until after Haggadah and drink. So seemingly that should have been the instruction here too, not telling you to hold it till the end of Galanu. He should say to hold it until the end of Haggadah. Answer, perhaps the reason. Because as far as the bracha of Haggadah goes, you only need to hold the cup, and not raising it up. Let's explain. I'm passing me a cup so I can demonstrate.
Sure.
Thank you.
It's a liquid.
When you make Haggadah on a Tuesday, what do? How do you hold your cup? Hold in your right hand.
Right.
When you make Kiddush, how do you hold your cup? Right hand, left hand, lower it into the palm of your right hand. This is called raising up your cup. This is called holding your cup.
Oh, really?
In halachic terminology, actually, the Rebbe says it.
Oh.
So as far as Haggadah goes, all you need to do is this. But when it comes to all the other paragraphs, to the end of Galanu, you got to hold it like that.
Right.
Yagbiya, you got to raise it up. And as we'll see in a moment, this is explained in the Torah. The reason why you're doing this is because you're doing this, you're holding it up like this, raising it up, not just holding it. You're doing this, and you actually have to hold it 3 tvachim off the, supposed to hold it 3 tvachim off the table, right? The reason we're doing that is to display it in front of everybody else, kind of the way you're holding up your matzah to display it in front of everybody else. And that way you're bringing a cherishment to the mitzvah, and you're reciting the praises of Hashem over a cup of wine as it's being displayed. But when it comes to Haggadah, you don't have to do that. You just have to hold it to make the bracha.
So,
And therefore, the instruction here is precise. Raise up your cup until the end of Galanu. So in theory, if you'd like to, at the end of Galanu, you can rearrange your cup in your hand, and you're no longer holding it like this, but you're holding it like that. And that way you're not raising it up. You're just holding it. Now, parentheses, it happens to be our custom, Chabad, that that on the Seder night, we always hold it up like that. Even though, for example, let's say the Haggadah at the 4th cup, which is not attached, the Haggadah of the 1st cup is attached to Kiddush. So you're holding it up like that anyway because it's part of your Kiddush. Okay. The Haggadah of benching, the Haggadah of the 3rd cup is attached to benching, so you're holding it up because of benching. But the Haggadah of
2,
2 and
3.
4.
of 4, of 2 and 4, or at least 4 for sure, is not attached to anything before it that you're holding, right? You conclude Hallel at the end before 4 with the Ishtabach. You don't hold your cup up of wine by Ishtabach. So in theory, then you can hold it just like that, like you do on a Tuesday, and not like this. But the Chabad custom is to hold it like this. But nonetheless, in theory, you can hold it this way. And therefore, the instruction here is to raise up your cup until Galanu, because if you want, in theory, by Haggadah, you don't have to raise it up in that way. Precise language. Okay, next comment.
So he's not saying then to hold it from Laficha up until Galantano regular, and then by Kiddush transfer.
It's actually the way around. He's saying the whole time while you're holding it up during Hallel, you got to raise it up like this because you're doing your display now.
Right.
When you do a display, you got to hold it properly. But by Haggadah, you're holding it just for the drinking, and hold it however you always hold it on Tuesday. Okay, the answer again, as the Chabad custom is, we always hold it like this anyway at the Seder, but in theory, you don't have to. Okay. Now, what? All right. Now comes the next comment. Before we get to the next comment from the Rebbe, let's understand the following: a little background history. So we spoke about this before. The Alter Rebbe compiled a siddur and included instructions, and that's what Haggadah is. Okay. Now, printing exists already in the time of the Alter Rebbe. It's in the late 1700s, mid to late 1700s. The Alter Rebbe passes away in 1812. Yeah. So the siddur is published somewhere in the 1700s. But again, even though it's printed, it begins with manuscripts, always. It's not typeset on the computer anywhere, and therefore mistakes constantly happen in manuscripts as they're reprinted and recopied and so on. So what happens is that the Alter Rebbe there are siddurim that we have, that today recently discovered one. We spoke about this when we learned about the Alkane, right? We showed pictures of the first printing. Remember this?
Yes.
We spoke a little bit about this then, about the various different prints. So there was a print that was printed in the Alter Rebbe's time. I'm not mistaken, there was actually 3, but we only have one of them. We only have one of the 3 today, one of those 3 prints. And at any rate, in one of those prints, the Alter Rebbe took a pencil or pen and wrote glosses fixing the mistakes of the printer. Which means many people would have had a siddur that was printed, and on the cover it said, compiled by the Alter Rebbe, which was incomplete because the Alter Rebbe himself added comments later. The Alter Rebbe's grandson, it's a Matzevek, took it upon himself to take those manuscripts and add them into the newer prints. And that became the Siddur Torah Or. Right? And sometimes there was even further mistakes. And as I mentioned before, the Rebbe's great-grandfather, my great-great-great-great-grandfather from David Lavut, the author of the Shalom Koilo, that was one of his projects, one of his big projects is to verify the exact version of the Alter Rebbe Siddur and publish it properly. That became the version we still use till today. We spoke about this once before. Okay, so now says the Rebbe. Okay, bottom left, Yechasas Apas, that instruction, etc. The Siddur Torah Or, and the Siddur called Torah Or. Hetik Hagoy Tzemach Tzedek Alzeh. The Tzemach Tzedek copied the glosses, which read, "V'yachzenu b'yadai ad sheyachtem Gal Yisrael." Hold it in your hand until you conclude the bracha Gal Yisrael.
Hold it,
Yeah.
not raise it.
Oh, because the instruction in the Siddur said raise it, but didn't say when to put it down.
Mm.
And the Alter Rebbe added, hold it in your hand until the end of the bracha, which means hold it as it's raised. Right? Go back to the instruction up here. Yechasas apas, cover the bread, v'yagbias hakos, and raise up the cup. The Alter Rebbe Siddur would have concluded right there. But the glosses that were hand put in and then typed in by the Tzemach Tzedek read the next part. Hold it in your hand until the end of the bracha of redemption.
Meaning, keep it raised up until.
Exactly. To that point, exactly. And the Tzemach Tzedek added, back to the bottom here. The Tzemach Tzedek added again in his glosses, and the reason is explained in the Torah, quoting from the Medrash. And there the Torah explains, I have it printed here. The reason the Torah explains is because the Medrash says that you want to say the pray, you want to sing the song holding a cup of wine. Shira la yayin. Okay. So from this is clear, says the Rebbe. This second half of the line, right? The line says raise up the cup, and then it says hold it in your hand or maintain it in your hand until after Galanu. Clearly, it wasn't actually in the printed version of the Alter Rebbe Siddur. It's only added afterwards. Because the Tzemach Tzedek added. So it would seem that Tzemach Tzedek added it, if I'm understanding from Rabbi Levi correctly about the history, it seems that Tzemach Tzedek added it from his grandfather's handwritten glosses, but clearly it wasn't in the printed Siddur of the Alter Rebbe, because it had to be put in later by the Tzemach Tzedek. Right? And the Rebbe continues, likewise, Einam, this second part, which says to keep it raised until after the brach of Galanu, Einam b'siddur Kol Yaakov, is not in the Siddur called Kol Yaakov, one of the early Ashkenazi Siddurs, not in the Siddur of the Shalah, another one of the early Ashkenazi Siddurs, and not in the Yavitz. Yavitz is our friend Rabbi Yaakov Emden that we learned about. Right? Rabbi Yaakov Emden, the guy who had a printing press in his house.
Who was accused of being
the one who accused the other guy, the one who accused the other rabbi. He's the accuser of being the Shabtai Tzvi. Yes, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, this is a famous one. So in his Siddur also, one of his projects was to make a Siddur. He did that as well. Okay. So the Rebbe is saying that the Alter Rebbe Siddur did not have this instruction to keep it holding till after Galanu. And that's not by accident, because the Rebbe is pointing to three other Siddurim that predate the Alter Rebbe, which also didn't have that instruction. Which means as follows. If you followed these three Siddurim, and the Alter Rebbe's printed Siddur, not the gloss that's a Tzemach Tzedek, what would you do? You would hold the cup by leficha because it says to raise it up. When would you put it down? At the end of that paragraph. So in our three stages, what would you do? You'd raise it up for leficha, the first paragraph, put it down for the Halaluka B'Teis Yisrael, and pick it back up by bracha galanu, or for Haggadah, one of the two.
Right.
And in fact, in the Alter Rebbe's printed Siddur, which doesn't have this instruction to keep on holding it till the end, it actually says before the bracha galanu, it says raise the cup.
Also, then you would raise it before that.
You would raise it again. So you pick it up,
That, and again,
put it down for the two paragraphs of Hallel, raise it back up for the bracha galanu, and hold it till after Haggadah.
Oh, they wouldn't put it down now because Haggadah follows right afterwards.
Exactly, you wouldn't put it
So
down.
wouldn't put it down.
Maybe you would rearrange it from this to this if you wanted to,
If
but
you
you wouldn't put it down. Right now, because of the Tzemach Tzedek's go ahead. Because the Tzemach Tzedek's gloss, which included this instruction to keep on holding it till after Galanu, the instruction before the bracha Galanu to pick it up has been omitted from our printed Siddurim. Why should it be there? It's only there if you're putting it down at the end of the first paragraph, lefichach, which you would do if you were following the printed version of the Alter Rebbe Siddur without the gloss, and you were following the Kol Yaakov, the Shalom, the Yavitz. Okay, clear?
Where
And it was-
presumably did
Sorry?
Where presumably did the Alter Rebbe find reason to change it to?
Keeping it holding,
Yeah.
because of the Torah and Shulchan Aruch. The Torah and Shulchan Aruch said to keep it the whole way.
Ah, okay.
There's sources for both.
Interesting that.
There's sources for
if
both
you actually
versions.
do all these Siddurim without catching that.
No, there's sources for both. The Torah and Shulchan Aruch say to hold it the whole time.
Sources for both.
That's correct.
So it's a question of how.
That's right.
It should be done.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But I just had a question about
Yes.
changing it back before you do Haggadah. And if you wanted to, you said you could change it back. But
So,
maybe perhaps the reason why in Chabad or that this line of thinking is not to do that is because would that consider perhaps a downgrade in
Hello?
Haggadah to change your positioning of the holding of the cup would sort of be perhaps be construed as the meaning to the cup of Haggadah. To going like this, to going like this.
Why the Chabad maybe not to do that? Maybe.
I mean, we talk about not downgrading things.
Right. One second. I have to correct myself. 1 second, I have to correct myself. I'm sorry. Make one correction. The instruction in the Alter Rebbe Siddur to raise your cup of wine was not before Galanu, it was before Hagafen.
Oh,
Which actually means you wouldn't even hold by Galanu either.
Oh,
You'd be holding it by Lefichach, putting it down and picking it up for Hagafen, in which case you wouldn't have to hold it like this unless you're following Chabad custom.
Just for Haggadah then.
Yes, just Hagafen.
Okay.
Yes, correct. Yes, correct. My apologies. And that would be and apparently the Marash, the Tzemach Tzedek's son, did it that way. Would hold it for Lefichach, put it down, and then pick it up by Hagafen, not picking it up for Galanu. Interestingly. Right? So now we have so far two versions then. One is, if you were following Tzemach Tzedek's glosses, you pick it up by Lefichach, hold it all the way till after Hagafen. Two is, you're following the printed version of the Alter Rebbe Siddur, which would be Shalah, Yavitz, Kol Yaakov, to pick it up by Lefichach, put it down, and pick it up by Hagafen. And by Hagafen, you wouldn't have to raise it up, just have to hold it. Yeah? Okay, now what's the Chabad custom? Yeah? Does that solve your problem?
Put it down. You said you wouldn't have to put it down.
By which version? Tzemach Tzedek's glosses?
Yeah.
You would hold it all the way through till after Hagafen.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why you would want to switch from here to this, but you could if you wanted to, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
So the second version is you put it down.
Hold Lefichach, put it down, pick it back up for Hagafen. In which
You
case,
said the redemption paragraph.
oh yes, I made the mistake. That's my mistake.
After that,
I jumped the gun. Because there is that version in the second.
This way or this way.
There is a third version told up by Galanu.
Okay,
which
so
is
that
our
makes
custom.
more sense than because it wouldn't seem like in midway you're going like this.
Correct, yes.
That would look
Yes.
silly.
But it's not obligatory is the point.
No, for sure
Yeah.
not. But putting it down already, there's a break and
Yeah,
in that
and then pick it up
transition,
naturally,
so
yes.
It doesn't appear to be
Yes.
sort of a downgrade.
Correct.
So-
Yes. Oh, that's your point. Got it.
Yeah,
Yes.
that
Yes.
was sort of my point.
Yes, yes,
You're
yes.
holding it like this, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
you're going like this.
It's strange.
And
Yeah.
it seems very strange.
Yeah.
That would be another question for the child to ask.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So now we have two versions so far. I jumped the gun and get the third version ready. We have two versions so far. One is hold it by Lefichach. Okay, this version is again following the Tzemach Tzedek glosses. Pick it up by Lefichach, hold it all the way till the end after Hagafen. Version A, Tzemach Tzedek glosses, which is the way it appears in our Siddur. Version 2, printed version of Alter Rebbe Siddur / Kol Yaakov Shalah Yavitz. Pick up by Lefichach, read that paragraph, put it down, say B'tzeis, say Hallelujah, say B'tzeis, say Eg Baruch Asher Galanu, then pick it up for Hagafen. Version 3, Minig Beis Harav, the custom in the house of the Rebbes, which means the previous Rebbe. Lamrois Mashakasa Bagois Admor Nishmas Edim Shebesidah Torah. Notwithstanding the Rebbe Rashab's glosses in the Siddur of Tzemach Tzedek. Okay, so let's get this clear. The Tzemach Tzedek has a Siddur and inserts the glosses of the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe Rashab Tzemach Tzedek's grandson. So Alter Rebbe made the siddur, put glosses. His grandson Tzemach Tzedek printed a siddur with those glosses in it. His grandson, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, wrote notes in the siddur printed by his grandfather. The Rashab is writing glosses in the siddur printed by his grandfather Tzemach Tzedek, in which he writes, "My father, fifth Chabad Rebbe, Reb Marash, did not follow his father's gloss. Instead, what his father would do is follow the printed version of Alter Rebbe, hold it for lefichach, put it down, and pick it up for Haggadah."
What?
Notwithstanding all of that, notwithstanding Tzemach Tzedek's gloss, notwithstanding the Rebbe Rashab's gloss, the minig of the previous Rebbe, and this remains Chabad minig, is like biyah hakois, is to raise the cup. So raise it, not hold, raise. And read it to the end of the paragraph lefichach, which concludes with the words, and therefore we shall say before you Hallelujah. And this is indeed how the instruction is said in Haggadah Maimonis, this custom, to put it down at the end of lefichach. Put it down on the table. And then you raise it up again for the bracha asher galanu. So version 3. Pick it up for lefichach, put it down for Hallelujah b'tzeis, pick it up for asher galanu. And that's the Chabad custom.
And then hold it until after.
After Haggadah. Yes. V'chein kosev parentheses, v'chein kosev Orach HaShulchan. The Orach HaShulchan, we also had occasion to talk about when we spoke about the Alkain. The Orach HaShulchan is the Rav in Navardok. His name was Rabbi Yechiel Michal Epstein, if I remember correctly, contemporary of the Chafetz Chaim, which is the same time as the Rebbe Rashab, who wrote also a code, a very thorough code called the Orach HaShulchan, in which he says to do it the way we do it, which is version 3. Raise up the cup by lefichach, put it down for Hallelujah b'tzeis, pick it back up for Haggalanu.
And you pick it up for Galanu. No, I say that.
Galanu, the bracha of redemption.
Right? Picking it up like this.
Yes, we always pick it up that way. We always do Hagbah. We always do raising up on the Seder
And
night.
then you continue until after.
Till after Haggadah. Okay?
Does the Chabad Haggadah that you use have these pointers printed out inside them?
Yes. Your modern Haggadah will have all this stuff updated in the English instructions. But now you get the backstory.
Right, no, sure.
Okay, so 3 versions, and we go with version 3, which ironically doesn't appear not in the Tzemach Tzedek's glosses and not in the Rebbe Rashab's glosses. But that's our custom.
It's so crazy
It's
how he
funny.
would just not follow his father's minhag.
Where these things came from and how they evolved is difficult to understand.
Yeah, real
but-
kodesh.
You know, the Rebbe was one of the Rebbe's things, actually. One of his first missions when he came to America and became in charge of Kahas, in charge of the printing press of Chabad while his father-in-law was still Rebbe, one of the Rebbe's big missions was to collect Chabad custom. The Hayom Yom, which has a random days, will show you different customs of Chabad, is part of their mission to collect Chabad custom. And which eventually became what's known as the Sefer Manhagim. And one of the people to work with the Rebbe on this was Rabbi Greenglass here from Montreal.
Oh, wow.
And Rabbi Groner. Rabbi Greenglass and Rabbi Groner together worked under the Rebbe's guidance to collect Chabad custom. They were fragmented, so people had to you see in the Rebbe's letters from those years, he would write to different, Rabbi Landa, for example, was famous, who Rabbi Landa, Allah Shalom, the old Rabbi Landa of Bnei Brak, Rabbi Yaakov Landa, was the chief Rabbi of Bnei Brak. Before he was in Bnei Brak, he was a Rav in Lubavitch. So he knew the customs of the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, and the Rebbe would consult with him, tell me what would the Rebbe Rashab do, how did his father do it, what was the minhag there, and the Rebbe was collating all the minhagim, and the Rebbe would ask different people to tell me what they saw. The Rebbe himself had preserved his father-in-law and would record his father-in-law's custom.
So the chief rabbi of Bnei Brak at one point was a Lubavitcher, from Lubavitch.
Till today.
Oh, till today.
His son took him over, Rabbi Moshe Landa, and now his son today is the Rav of Rabbi, I can't remember his first name actually. The new chief rabbi is also Landa, is Lubavitcher.
Right,
The chief rabbis of Bnei Brak for the last 3 generations are Chabadniks, yes.
but there's no Lubavitch that live in Bnei Brak.
There are some Lubavitchers in Bnei Brak, but nonetheless, the seat of Rabbanos in Bnei Brak is a Lubavitcher seat, the Landa family. Okay, let's do one more comment before we have to go. Yechasa Sapas, just to close up this discussion. Yechasa Sapas, you cover the bread. Why? So it shouldn't be embarrassed because you're about to raise up the cup of wine, as we noted. You raise up the cup. Why? As the Torah says, one doesn't say song unless one is holding wine. So we sing the song over wine, and that's what this paragraph is. And therefore, we have to laud you and praise you and thank you and so on and so forth. More of which we will discuss, God willing, tomorrow. We're not going to learn all the Rebbe's comments on the Hallel because it's not really related to our Gemara, at least not just yet, because the next paragraph in our Gemara is going to discuss the language of Hallelujah. So we're going to save the next comments of the Rebbe for after we learn that Gemara. But before that, we're going to go.
We finish this by the time.
1 second. Maybe by the time the next day that comes around. Yes. We're going. Yes, very good. Exactly. We're going to learn the comments on the Bracha Galanu because that does come from our Gemara. Before we get back to our Gemara, we're going to look at the comments on the Bracha Galanu because that came from our Mishnah already. And then when we finish the Gemara's comments on the Halalukas, then we'll go to the Rebbe's comments on the Halalukas, which is taken from our Gemara. Okay. Have a wonderful day.
Excuse me.
What? You know, our Gemara is like this. Our Gemara discusses the Bracha Galanu and then goes back to discuss the Halal. The Rebbe's going in order. Halal and then Halal and then Galanu. So we're gonna do it a little out of order. We're gonna do it like that. All right. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Good day. All right, thank you.
When you're into it, learning Torah is always beautiful. Okay.
Confusing.
Good day.
The halal
Confusing.
itself, though.
It's elating.
Change
Yeah.
The halal itself, it doesn't like it's the whole halal.
Showing the first half. We're gonna discuss that as well. Why that is.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Have a good day. You can